I'm Tashi and welcome to my home. We're making scrunchies.
I love yarn. I love yarn. I love yarn. I love yarn.
So chances are, if you're watching this video, you may have purchased one of my Scrunchie crochet kits, which looks a little something like this. If you have not, you can find these kits on my website, tashiathome.com. They come with everything you need to make 3 different sizes of scrunchies, which is what we're going to be kind of going through in this tutorial video together today. So for those of you that haven't purchased the kit, if you have yarn laying around or you want to go buy your own yarn in order to make this, here are the things that you're going to need to get started. In order to make our small scrunchie, you are going to need some faux fur yarn. I'm using Yarn Bee for the moment, but there's lots of other brands that have lots of different types of fur yarn. If you also get like a super plushy yarn, that'll work as well. So just something super fuzzy, something super soft, that's what you need to make the small one. Then for the medium-sized scrunchie, I will be using Juicy Couture yarn, and I'm gonna make a red one for our tutorial video today. So this is the color Fire, and it does have some sparkle in it. I don't know if you can catch that sparkle. I really like Juicy Couture's velvet yarn, but it's primarily sold at Joann's, and I'm not sure what the status of Joann's is going to be. So if you are desperate for some Juicy Couture, you again can go and purchase one of my scrunchie kits, because the ones that I'll have available will have Juicy Couture in them. And then for our large scrunchie, you guys are going to want some Bernat velvet yarn. And of course, you can use any velvet yarn to make the medium and the large scrunchie. Those are just the flavors and the brands that I will be using for this tutorial video. In addition to the yarn, you are going to need some hair ties, of course, because we will be crocheting around these hair ties in order to form our scrunchies. In addition to your yarn and your scrunchies, you are also going to want a yarn needle. I'm just using a plastic one. This is also what comes in the scrunchie kits. If you order one, you're going to need a 5.5 millimeter crochet hook, which I also sell with the kits as an add-on if you so choose, and you're just going to need a pair of scissors. Any scissors will do as long as they can cut the yarn. Once you've assembled all of your supplies, we'll go ahead and get started. And we're actually going to start by making the large scrunchie first. If you purchased the yarn kit, you'll want to pull out the skein that has the large wrap around it, and you can go ahead and take your yarn out from the piece of paper. Since I'm using a different color, I just have my yarn right here. You're also going to want to grab a hair tie. You can use any color and any size hair tie to make your scrunchie. So I usually just pick one that's the closest kind of color to the yarn that I am using. So to get started, all that we're going to do is we're going to tie our yarn around our scrunchie, and you can do it at any point on the scrunchie. So just kind of stick your yarn through your scrunchie like this. And I like to do a triple knot just to make sure that it's nice and tight. One thing you might want to be careful of with the velvet yarn especially is if you pull too tight, it does tend to snap on you. So just kind of be cautious of that. Okay, once we have our yarn tied on, we're gonna go ahead and start crocheting our scrunchie. So on all of these scrunchies, no matter what size you're making, the very first thing that you do is you're actually going to just do a single crochet all the way around the hair tie. So I'm gonna go ahead and take my hook, and we're going to stick our hook through the middle of the hair tie as if it were a magic ring, and we're kind of crocheting into the magic ring. I'll just go ahead and stick my hook through, and then I am going to want to pull up that yarn. And we will just go ahead and make a slip knot for starters. So when you pull up a loop of yarn, you're just going to yarn over and pull through the loop on your hook. Now you'll notice that I am crocheting over this tail as I go, which you can absolutely do, or you can choose to weave it in later. It really doesn't matter. It's totally up to you. The thing I love most about scrunchies is you really cannot mess them up. So just do your best, and I promise it'll turn out super cute in the end. So the next thing that we're gonna do is we're just gonna do single crochets all the way around. So to do that, I'm just going to stick my hook through the center of the hair tie. I'm going to pull up a loop. So I should have 2 loops on my hook. Then I'm going to yarn over and pull through 2. And that's how you make a single crochet. So again, I'll show that slowly one more time. So we'll stick our hook through the hair tie. I'm going to grab the yarn and pull up a loop. So I'll have 2 loops on my hook. Then I'm going to yarn over and pull through 2. So we're just going to do this all the way around the hair tie. And I'm going to give you some tips here as we get going a little bit as to how we can make sure our scrunchie is the absolute scrunchiest that it can possibly be. Okay, now I'm kind of getting back towards the beginning of where I started, so you can see I'm running out of hair tie space. But what we want to do when we're making scrunchies is we want to make sure that all of our stitches are actually pretty close together. So watch what happens when I actually stretch the hair tie. You can see there's a lot of space in between my stitches, which honestly, when we wear this as a scrunchie, if we leave all that space between our stitches, it's not gonna look good. So I like to put my fingers up kind of towards the top of where both ends of my stitches end. And I kind of just like to pull a little bit as I'm stretching, not too terribly hard, but you'll see that it'll kind of slide those stitches a little more snugly together. And then I have a lot more hair tie that I can keep doing my single crochets through. So make sure you do that a couple of times before we finish off this first round of making our large scrunchie. So again, here I just got to the end, but I'm going to pull my stitches and just give it a little stretch. Again, I'm not being super aggressive with this, and you can kind of work them around if your first stitch is stuck, because that knot does tend to kind of get stuck in place. So we still want them, you know, pretty evenly spaced out. You'll know if you're scrunching your stitches too hard, because what's going to happen is they'll start to kind of rotate. And I'll see if I can show you that here in just a second. I'll try to show you what that'll look like if you're scrunching your stitches too hard. Okay, so here again, I got back to the beginning for my third time. Let me see if I can kind of scrunch these really hard so you can see what it'll start to look like. So if you start to get like twisting happening with your stitches like this, that's because you're scrunching your stitches way too hard. So all you have to do is just kind of spread them out again, make a little room so that they're all straight, because we want all of these ridges, which are the tops of our stitches, to kind of line up with each other. So if you get any twisting, try to fix it before we move on to the next round. So once I realign them, then I'll just come back up. I'll just do my gentle kind of tug and just make sure that all of my stitches kind of stay lined up correctly. And then we'll keep going with our single crochets for a little bit more. Okay, and I usually just do this a couple of times until I really am not getting very far when I do a gentle tug on each end of my stitches. So you'll see they're not going very far. Of course, I could force them further, but then I'll start to get that twisting happening with my stitches, which is what I don't want. So I'm just gonna add a couple more, and then we will probably call this good. Now, I don't give an exact count of how many stitches around, because it really depends on the size of your hair tie. All hair ties kind of come in different sizes. Even this one that I'm using is thinner than the ones that I'm going to use for the medium and the small. So you just really have to kind of eyeball it and make your scrunchie, you know, compatible with your hair tie. So once you get it to a point where you think it's pretty good, you can test it by giving it a little stretch to see if you're seeing any space in these stitches below. Don't worry about this space up here, because that'll fill in once we add our next row. I'm more so worried about the gaps that are kind of happening down here, which there aren't a lot of gaps happening. It's much better than it was when I first showed you, but I will probably add just a couple more stitches, and then we'll go ahead and we'll finish off this round. So just to finish off this round, all you have to do is slip stitch into that first stitch. Now, the thing you'll notice with velvet yarn is that sometimes it can be hard to see where your stitches actually are. Do your best. Honestly, what I love the most about scrunchies is that they are super, super forgiving, and you will not notice if you make mistakes, trust. Oh, hi Kevin. So all we're gonna do is we're going to slip stitch into our approximate first stitch. So I just like to kind of shove my hook in there till it goes through a couple of stitches, and then yarn over, and we're gonna pull through all of the loops on our hook, just like that. Now we're going to build out the next round, which is also the last round of our large scrunchie. So the large scrunchie is actually composed of treble crochets all the way around. And our objective with this scrunchie is to place 3 treble crochets into each single crochet stitch. So in order to start my first kind of treble crochet, I'm actually just gonna chain 3. So to chain, we'll yarn over and pull through the loop on our hook. So that's 1, do that again for 2, and one more time for 3. Okay, so now kind of in the stitch right below that, the one we slip stitched into, or even the one next to it, it really does not matter, you guys. But if you kind of like stick your finger in there, you'll be able to kind of see where the holes are. So I'm probably gonna go into this one that's right next to where I slip stitched into. That's kind of where we're gonna put 3 treble crochets. So to do a treble crochet is you yarn over twice. So you're going to have 3 loops on your hook. Then you're going to stick your hook through the next stitch. And again, if you can't see where it is, literally just put your hook along the base of where you have those chains and give it a jab until it goes through. And I promise it'll be just fine. Then we're going to pull up a loop. So in total, you'll have 4 loops on your hook. You're going to yarn over, go through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and do it one more time, yarn over, pull through 2. We're going to do that same thing again into that same stitch. So again, we're going to yarn over twice. We're going to stick our hook through the same loop. So again, if you just kind of look as to where that treble is coming out of, you can literally just stick your hook right below that treble crochet to get it into the same stitch. We'll pull up a loop. So we have 4 loops on our hook. We'll yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and do that one more time, yarn over, pull through 2. Now there we have our first 3 treble crochets, technically 2 with a chain of 3, but our chain of 3 is counting as our first one. So now we're going to move to our next stitch. So now to find the next stitch, the thing that I like to do is, again, I kind of just like to pull on my 3 treble crochets and then pull beside my stitch, and you'll see there's kind of this like line right here. That's your next stitch. That's right up against these first 3 treble crochets. So this right here is where we're going to want to go into. Again, you can just eyeball it, just like jab. If you just jab blindly and you start sticking 3 treble crochets as close together as possible all the way around, I promise you that your scrunchie will come together and nobody's going to know that you were just pretending to know what you were doing. All right, so I'll do this next one for you and then we'll kind of meet back up at the end. So again, 3 treble crochets into this next stitch. So yarn over twice, stick your hook through that next loop, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and we're going to do that 2 more times into that same stitch. And as we continue to progress on this round, you guys are going to notice that what happens is these stitches are going to get super smushed together. So I'm going to crochet a little bit more around, doing the exact same thing of 3 treble crochets into each single crochet of that first round, and I'll meet up with you guys a little bit later on. Okay, so here you can see I'm about halfway done, and this is what it should be doing. So as you continue to build on those treble crochets, it is going to get very wavy like this. That's how you know that you have done everything right. If you're finding that it's not quite as wavy and it's a little more flat, that would be because either 1, you're not actually putting 3 treble crochets into each of the stitches below, so you might be accidentally missing and moving to the next stitch instead of putting them into the same stitch. So if that's happening to you, just really make sure that when you're putting your hook through, you're going like right underneath the stitch that you already made, because that'll assure that you're going into the same stitch instead of going next to it. That'll progress you to the next one. So that's one area where you might need to fix. Or if it's flat and you're absolutely positive you're putting 3 treble crochets into each stitch, then that probably just means you don't have enough single crochets on your base row. So you might want to just go back to the single crochets, give your scrunchie a little stretch, pull those single crochets a little bit tighter together and add a few more, because then that'll start to give you the nice wave. So I'm going to keep working this row. Now once we get towards the end, it will be getting very hard to see where your stitches are, so I'll meet up with you when I get to about right here and give you some more tips and tricks to help you finish out this large scrunchie. So once you get down kind of to this point, you really want to make sure that you're getting into all of these stitches. So here you can see I have 3 stitches left. So if you just kind of stretch everything out, you want to look for these gaps that you have. So each of these gaps is essentially a stitch. So I have 3 left, which means I have 9 treble crochets that I want to finish in this last portion. So I will do that really quick. Now, if the scrunchie starts to kind of fold in on itself and get in your way, you'll notice that as I'm doing this, I'm just kind of tucking this side of the scrunchie back and holding it with my thumb and my middle finger so that it's kind of out of the area that I'm working on. And that's just a nice way that you can kind of maneuver the scrunchie out of your way so that you can easily finish these last few stitches. But I do usually end up catching the beginning once I get this close to the end, so I gotta slow down a little bit here. Okay, I am on my very last stitch. So again, this little stitch right here that's probably attached to our chain 3 that we started with, you want to make sure that you get some stitches or some treble crochets into that stitch, just to make sure everything looks really nice. Once you finish your last stitch, this is going to be a super easy end. All you're going to do is stick your crochet hook through the top of that chain 3. You're going to do a slip stitch, so yarn over, pull through all of the loops on your hook, and then we're going to fasten off. So we're just going to do another slip stitch, and if you need to trim your yarn, you can. Otherwise, you may have made it to the end of your skein if you have the kit. So then we'll just pull it through here, give it a little tug to tighten that knot. And you have a beautiful and super fluffy, hopefully, scrunchie. So the very last thing that we need to do is we just need to weave in our ends. So you can see that I did stitch over on that first round. I stitched over my end, and I think I can see it right here, just poking out a little bit. Maybe, oh, maybe not. So usually if you stretch your scrunchie, that will help kind of hide your beginning tail a little bit. Otherwise, what you can do is you can take that beginning tail and just kind of weave it through some of the single crochets and just stretch it to make sure that it kind of hides in there, and then you can snip off the end if needed. For this tail, I just like to weave it in as best that I can, as many times as I can. Now, the nice thing about velvet yarn is that it's super forgiving, so it's really, really easy to hide the tail. It doesn't matter what side you do it down. There's not really a right or wrong way to do this. So I just kind of like to come down one of the treble crochets. So I'll just kind of weave my way back and forth down a treble crochet till I get to that base single crochet row. So I just go back and forth a few times, and then I'll get all the way to the base. And then what I like to do is I actually like to take my hook and go through a couple of the single crochet stitches. So I just kind of hold it as in place as I can, and then I just kind of wiggle my yarn through those single crochet stitches. And I'm actually not getting it quite yet. There we go. Yeah, so if you just look at the other side, you'll be able to tell if you're actually going through the stitches or if you're just poking yourself out the other side. So you want to be going through the center of the stitches. So if you can't see your needle there and you flip it over and you can't see your needle there, that means you are through the center of the stitches. So I just go through a few and I'll pull it out, and then I like to reverse directions. So obviously don't go through the exact same stitch your yarn's coming out of. I like to skip a stitch and then go back a little bit. The more that you can kind of weave this tail in, the more secure the end is going to be. So hopefully it won't like pop out randomly to say hi at any point in time. So once I do that, I just take my needle out. Again, I'll give it a little stretch just to kind of make sure that yarn has room to play. And then I will pull it a little bit. So just give it a little pull and snip, making sure not to snip any of the components of that first row. And there we have made a large scrunchie. Pretty easy, right? I think we are ready to move on to the medium scrunchie. All right, so for the medium scrunchie, so much of what we just did is going to actually be exactly the same. One thing that I did forget to say with the large scrunchie is before I start crocheting over the hair tie, I do like to stretch it out a little bit because sometimes you get a faulty hair tie that does snap. So I just give it a couple of stretches, making sure that nothing's gonna come apart, making sure that the glued portion stays together. This one's looking really good, so we're ready to start our scrunchie. We're gonna start it exactly the same way that we started our large one, just by tying on our yarn. So we'll go ahead and I'll do a triple knot for mine. And then again, we're starting the exact same way as the large scrunchie, where we're going to take our hook and we are just going to start with a base round of single crochets. So all you have to do is stick your hook through the center of the hair tie, pull up a loop, do a slip stitch to get us started, and then we'll go ahead and start with our single crochets. So you'll stick your hook through the hair tie, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. And we will just do this all the way around using the same method that we used when we were doing the large scrunchie. So I'll go ahead and finish up this round and I will meet you at the end. Okay, so here I am at the end of my single crochet round. I have stretched it and scrunched it a couple of times and it was starting to get a little twisty, so I decided that this was gonna be where I end it. So again, same exact thing as we did for our large scrunchie. You are actually just going to slip stitch into that first stitch to finish off that round. Now for the medium scrunchie, we're essentially doing the exact same thing again as the large scrunchie, where we're going to put 3 stitches into each of our single crochets of our first round. But to make it a medium size, instead of doing treble crochets, we're just going to do double crochets. So to get us started, we're actually just going to chain 2, and then we'll go ahead and start our double crochets into this next stitch. So to do a double crochet, all you do is yarn over, stick your hook through the loop, pull up a loop, then you should have 3 loops on your hook, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. And we'll do that 2 more times into that same stitch. So we'll yarn over, stick our hook through the stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So there we have 3 with our chain 2 counting as our first double crochet. So now we're ready to move into our next stitch. So again, if you kind of just pull it apart, you're looking for that space. That's where your next stitch is going to be. So we'll do 3 double crochets into that stitch as well. And we'll continue this pattern all the way around, putting 3 double crochets into each single crochet from our previous round. And again, just like the large scrunchie, it's going to start to form a wave pattern for you. And that's how you know that you added enough single crochets on your base row and that you are getting 3 of those double crochets into each of the stitches. So I will go ahead and finish up going around this hair tie and I will meet you towards the end. Okay, while I finish up this scrunchie, I thought I would give you guys a couple pieces of advice when it comes to making scrunchies. So first of all, if you ever come across a factory knot when you're dealing with velvet yarn, don't worry about it. I like to pull my factory knots tight just to make sure that they are secure, and if they're not, then I secure them myself again. But factory knots honestly blend in super well if you're working with velvet yarn and especially with our fur yarn. So don't let factory knots scare you. And then the other thing that you guys can consider too is if you want to make your scrunchie a little bit special, what you can do is you can use 2 different colors for the first row and then the outside row of your scrunchie. So you could do your single crochets in one color and then you could join a different color to do the actual scrunchie part of your scrunchie. And then if you want to get really fancy, if you add a single crochet row of a different color around the rim of all of these double crochets or the treble crochets on the large scrunchie, that's another way to just add a little bit of extra spice to your scrunchie. Okay, so here I am back at the end, just like we finished the large scrunchie. We're doing the same thing here. We're slip stitching into the top of our chain 2. And then you can go ahead and fasten off, cut your yarn, pull it through, weave it in, all the things. Now on this one, I did want to show you, because I do have a little anomaly happening right here where my first stitch just got a little bit funky. So one way that you can kind of fix stuff like that is when you are threading your yarn through and kind of sewing it in, you can actually sew that down. So you could just stick your needle with your tail kind of through that piece and then just weave it in, and it'll lay a little bit more flat. So if you ever do have a little issue like this with your scrunchie, just know that it's super, super easy to hide. Again, this is why scrunchies are one of my favorite things to make, because they just are so, so forgiving. So that, my friends, is the medium size scrunchie. And now we are going to go on to my favorite size personally, which is the small size scrunchie. So go ahead and grab your faux fur yarn and we'll get started on that one. Okay, so our faux fur yarn situation, we are actually going to start the exact same way. I know you're all shocked, but we're just going to go ahead and tie our faux fur yarn onto our scrunchie. Now, the thing that I love about the faux fur yarn is that it is even more forgiving than the velvet yarn. I know that's hard for you guys to believe, but because it's so fluffy, it really does an incredible job of hiding any mistakes that you might make along the way. So you may have guessed how we're going to make this faux fur tiny scrunchie. We went from a treble crochet in our large scrunchie to a double crochet on our medium scrunchie. And yes, you guessed it, we are going to a single crochet on our faux fur scrunchie. So this scrunchie is also my favorite because it can literally come together in like 2 minutes to 5 minutes flat, depending on how fast of a crocheter you are. So all we're gonna do is we're going to, just like we did with our last 2 scrunchies, pull up a loop and make ourselves a little slip stitch here. Now you're going to notice that as you're crocheting with this faux fur yarn, you are basically shooting in the dark, okay? That is totally normal. It is very hard to see what you're doing with this faux fur yarn, which is why I start with the other 2 so that you can kind of get a feel for how the yarn kind of comes together through the hair tie. And then we end with this one because you are really gonna have to go by feel here. Okay, so what you're gonna do is, again, you're just gonna stick your hook through the hair tie. We're going to pull up a loop. There are technically 2 loops on your hook, even though it's very hard to see because they're very furry loops. Okay, there are 2 there. Then we'll yarn over again and pull through 2. And then we keep doing that all the way around. And this is seriously just gonna start to look like a fuzzy little animal. But again, you're kind of going based on feel because it is very hard to see where your yarn is because it is so fluffy. So hopefully you kind of got the feel for it down with the first 2 scrunchies, but we're just going to do this one as if we're doing the base row of the other 2. So once you get all the way around with your faux fur yarn, you still will want to kind of pull it apart like you did with your other 2 very gently to kind of space those stitches a little closer together. So here I'm kind of back to the beginning. It's looking very fuzzy and cute, but I'm just going to kind of pull my yarn apart, stretch my scrunchie a little bit, and now I have a little more room to add a couple more single crochets with my faux fur yarn. So I'm just going to fill in all of the space that I can. Do another little stretch here, really make sure those stitches are nice and squished together. And this one, it's not a huge deal if the stitches start to turn with this because you literally will not be able to notice it. So just get to a point where you feel like, okay, once I stretch this out, I can't really see the hair tie at all. And then that'll be a good place to end it. And you've probably, again, guessed how we're going to end this. We're going to end this exactly the same way that we ended our last 2 scrunchies, just by slip stitching into that first stitch. Now, I think I'm gonna end mine here. I'm feeling like this is a pretty good spot to end. Maybe I'll do one more, just one more for good measure. Okay, now, you might be like, Tashi, how the heck am I supposed to find my first stitch in order to slip stitch into? What a wonderful question you have. I am so proud of you for being so insightful. You literally are just you're gonna jab it in there, okay? So I know that this is where my last stitch is, right? I can see that. My first stitch is somewhere in this vicinity. So I'm literally just gonna take my hook and just jab it in there until it goes actually through something, okay? I don't know for sure if that's my first stitch, but it's something. It'll hold it secure, so that works for me. I'm gonna yarn over, pull through, and pull through, and then we will fasten off. So we'll yarn over, pull through, and then you can clip if you have any extra, pull it through, and just like with our previous one, we will weave in our ends. Again, you just have to be careful with the faux fur yarn to make sure that you actually are weaving it in. So kind of what I like to do is, again, just we're stabbing in the dark, okay? If you kind of wiggle your needle kind of through the stitches, you can feel where they're at. Then just check both sides. If you can't see your needle, then that you're good to go, and that means that you actually made it through some stitches. So I just kind of like to pull this tail through a few stitches, and then I might go back a little bit. Like I said, faux fur yarn is even more forgiving than velvet yarn, so you just make it secure. And you can see I kind of have my starting tail like poking out here, so I'll clip that off as well. But we just pull it through, give it a little stretch, hide that tail, clip it off. Okay, and voila, look at us. We have made 3 different sizes of scrunchies. I didn't technically finish this one, but we won't talk about that. 3 different sizes of scrunchies in a very short amount of time. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial video, and I will see you next time for another crafting adventure.